All right, I think we have figured out the problem. My dad's trying out a new mic. There's always there's always something when something new comes on, but we're excited to get him on and to talk with him today about some more pressing issues that we're facing. It's technology is always a struggle. So in the meantime, while we wait for him to get on, I will update on the, well, it's an RV, but I like to call it a tour bus because I don't know, tour RV just doesn't quite work. But we just finalized the wrap, I don't know, design, and so it's going to be happening tomorrow. So we're very, very excited. I can't wait to reveal it at the national kickoff. All right, looks like he's on. Let's give this a try again. All right, here he comes. It likes to say adding for a while. Hey, and my dad's added a picture, so great. Hey,
Am I
Dad.
here now?
All
All
right,
right.
now we can hear you. Was it the
Yeah,
mic?
the mic. Yeah, it was the mic. It's a new one. I wanted to see if it had better tone and whatever. I mean, it was just trying to get it working. So, anyhow, how
I
are
know every
you?
time we
So,
try something new, it can be difficult.
well, difficult. Just trying to be air free, and that hasn't happened yet. So we'll get there though.
We'll get there. We will
Um,
get there for sure. For sure. So,
so
how's everything
I
going
did a
now?
couple. Good.
Good.
I've got a picture up this morning, so I put it on the on
I know,
my
I
profile. So
saw.
that
That's great. You
yeah,
stepped
that took a
through
little bit of
this.
struggle.
Yeah, no, you'll
Well,
get
I
there,
was
Dad.
just well, part of it is my phone was jammed with too much information, so I had to delete a bunch of stuff just to
Ah.
go find it. So
Yeah,
anyhow,
you're not alone. It's been the same problem with me. And actually, I posted online on my YouTube channel a discussion about something called interoperability. Have you ever heard of it?
I did. I listened.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a huge issue though. And as we progress forward into a digital space where everything's connected all the time, which I know is a little scary, but it's going to happen. I mean, it's we're making the transition from horse and buggies to automobiles. And so even though automobiles
So I'm
come
trying.
with some cost, they also come with such benefits that we're not going to get away from it, right? So we're going to be
Right.
making this transition, and how we set that up is incredibly important for reasons that you're noting. It's very hard to figure all this stuff out, and there's these little intricacies that you're trying to figure out just with your phone. You know, Facebook requires you to have the phone upright. It requires you to use the app. It requires all these little pieces. But now imagine you have to switch to a different operating system and to a different device, and you have to connect for your healthcare differently. What happens when you're in an
Right.
emergency and you don't know how to use the technology
Right.
that's available because it's different from the other one? We have to have these metrics that are the same. So
But
it's a hot topic in government, but the problem is the people who are experts in it, they're not political experts. So they
it's
don't get into that political echelon, and then they are yelling upward. A lot of people don't know, for example, that we haven't had internet in our military base schoolhouses. We've been fighting for it since 2000.
wow.
And it's because above us, the politicians don't want to take the legal concern of saying yes and then having a breach.
Well, I think, and that kind of leads into the subject that we were going to cover today, which is VA benefits. And
Yes.
one of the things that's kind of funny, or not funny, but I was thinking about it and how I could transition and show why we're in we're conflicted in different areas of healthcare, which is one of the major benefits for the VA provides, and it's certainly not the only one, but it's a major one.
Right.
And example being, I'm going to be having cataract surgery here in the next month. Okay, um, VA said no, Medicare said yes. Why? I mean, you're talking about same government, same everything. Why aren't the standards or whatever the same for a vet as it would be for a Medicare patient? Okay, um, I think those are the kinds of things that trip people up and they get them confused, and then we're also duplicating things at a certain within our own environment. I mean, those are we saving money, spending money? I don't know, but the fact is they shouldn't be different. A veteran should have the same standards as a Medicare patient. I just don't, and that's a challenge from
But you might think
not only
actually
me.
better.
What's that?
You might think actually better. Certainly
Yeah,
not worse benefits.
exactly. And it's just part of the plague that you talk about when it comes to these types of issues, and um, it is a concern with the folks that I met with. We talked about a lot of things. Once again, Gary presented a whole litany of great topics to discuss for the future. I thought
Yeah.
he continues to provide stuff out, so I appreciate it. But this topic I covered with some of the folks at the V the other night,
Hmm.
and especially about the VA benefits, and their concerns were. It just seems like it's um, very arduous to go through the process to get things done. Um, many of the guys there have been exposed to Agent Orange. Big
Yeah.
big problem.
Yeah.
They've they've tried to so take it down to, were you within 10 yards of this, piece of property to see if you were exposed to Agent
Yeah.
Orange. Um,
Standardizing and yeah.
well, it's not just standardizing. It's thinking about what's the greater good for the vet that was exposed in that area. Can
Good.
you really say that he was or he wasn't? I don't understand. I mean, I know I have people that were in Thailand, but they were definitely exposed to Agent Orange in Thailand. Well, they don't want to even admit that still today that was part of the conflict, and it's that's a real difficulty for vets. They really are struggling with those areas, and certainly within mind, it becomes an issue because of cost. And
Yeah.
the vets
So
actually understand that part, but they're
yeah. So
conflicted
well,
with
let
other
me
things.
just because we're stacking questions here. So let me hit some of them before we
Go.
move on. So first one is so interoperability can be technological, but it can also be human terms, right? So
Yes.
when you say VA says no and Medicare says yes, that is also interoperability, right? That is recognizing
Yes.
that we should have the same standards in both cases. And this is
So,
how it breaks down in government. The way it breaks down in government is that these fall under different departments. And the way the funding comes from Congress is that they get funded separately and for separate tasking, which means that it trickles down to an office that has no connection to the other office. And each one tries to solve the same problem independently. And it's shockingly problematic because number one, it costs a lot of money to do that. With multiple people trying to solve the same problem, A, somebody has a better answer than somebody else. And B, we're expending a lot of manpower and money trying to resolve the same problems. But what's interesting is the point that you made, which is that then the consumer, the vet, who's going, wait a minute, how did this break down? Distrust starts to set in. And then questions start to come. Do y'all have your act together? Are you spending money wisely? How come this basic thing isn't being addressed? And then it ripple effects into other questions. The way that you handle this problem is twofold. Number one, we have to get the people who are working on the same problems at the same table. The way you do that is you have to have somebody at a high enough level, and this literally has to be at the cabinet level, who values the points you just made and says, if we're working on this in Veterans Administration, I bet somebody's also working on this at Health and Human Services. We need to work together. Sometimes that happens. Most of the time, it does not. So that has to be the first call. But the second thing that has to happen is that we have to actually talk to the users. So what happens, it's called human-centered design. It's actually what I worked on in government. And what we find is that people who are in policy and people who are in politics know everything from their perspective, but they don't know everything from everyone else's perspective. And so we started these government programs to start going out to the users, to Americans, to vets, to whatever, to start saying, how is this working for you or how is this not? so that you can be part of that system. And actually, we have an example in the vets. The Office of Telehealth has been working on that problem exactly, and using human-centered designers to come in and say, how do we make this system work for the vets that are having to use it? Sorry. Callie got excited. But yeah, this is actually a problem that's starting to get addressed. And so when we do it in one space, we can actually replicate that same process in other spaces. I think the dog is excited. Sorry. So yeah, that is exactly how we handle it, and that's how we can take care of it in government. It's just a process. You have to know which groups are available to do human-centered design. You have to know who needs to give the approval in order to make the seamlessness between programs, but it's completely doable. You just have to have the right knowledge.
Good. Well, and that transitions into all departments. Doesn't matter whether it's VA or Medicare or anything
That's
else.
correct.
It's all these all the problems, and it goes back to what we even talked about before, where everybody's protecting turf and going to silos and not wanting to share because
Yes.
for whatever fear they have of not being held in esteem. I think that's a big problem. I think that the government is full of that problem, not so much that it isn't human driven, but I mean it's there, and I mean it exists in business too. Don't get me wrong. There's it doesn't matter when you get large organizations. There's people have a tendency to really want to protect where they're at and what's going on, and make sure that they're not harmed during that process, and that's a very difficult process. But the fact is, yeah. And that
Yeah, I
was the
mean,
VA
there's still,
benefits
I mean,
thing
this
that
is
was
a service position. So I do think there's a lot of workers. I think the difference is that we have political appointees between the workers and the
right.
administration. And so I think that's a bigger issue than worrying about turf. At the political space, sure.
Okay.
But at the worker space, I really do think people want to do a good job. They're making 75 cents on the dollar to do these jobs. So if they're not there to help the country, they get out and go take something else.
How would you, or when how are you thinking about correcting some of this, and how is it going to get done?
Yeah, so no, I think it's a great question. Forgive me, I have to plug in here for a minute. There we go. The way that we do this is basically the process that I've been going through, right? So the first one was who in government can make these changes. Required going through and actually interviewing government workers, figuring out what's working, what's not, and how we fix things. The next step, though, then is to do the same thing with Americans and go through and actually talk to communities. Just like you and I are talking, what does your community get concerned about, and is there an answer for it? Somebody like me is going to answer from a straight position, right? I've been in government. I get the federal employee concerns. I understand DOD. So I can give you a straight answer. A politician's going to give you a different kind of answer, right? Because they're coming out of Congress, so they're looking to pass laws. What we need to do, though, is have all the Americans who aren't in government, who are in fact our customers, if you will, who are paying the taxes, to be part of the solution space. And that's what the tour, that's entirely what the tour is. Come talk to us, come give us your information. I'll help work it into the plan. But it's a process. It takes time, and everyone has to participate.
I think one of the things that we've tried to do as a federal government is involve ourselves all the way down to the community level, which we don't need to do because that's not the job of the federal government. Right. The things you talk about, I think in a lot of respects are being done well. It's more of the participation part that gets difficult from folks, from the standpoint of, do we want a building built certain place? Is that a federal issue? It's not. It just is not. It belongs at the community level, and that's where it needs to stay. Unfortunately, we get people who want to ramp it up and push it up the ladder if they don't get what they want out of the local level, and so it just stalemates the whole thing. You become in this impasse where nothing moves because then it starts to go into the court system, and that's a very difficult area to start to navigate because it's very time consuming, and projects that could have been done or should have been done are now 10 years out, and now it's not the same problem because it's taken 10 years to figure out who's going to do it, where it's going to get funded, and blah blah blah. So I think one of the things, and this is why I'd like you to answer this, but I think it's important for some of the federal government to kind of take a bigger role towards doing what the federal government's supposed to do. I mean,
Yeah.
protect the country, make laws that are pertinent to what we need to drive for the greater good, and let the communities and stuff and states and whatever have their do what they need to do for their local constituents, rather than expecting the federal government to step in every time. But I know we're crossing into some crazy territory there, but it's not even you, or now you've already admitted, not even you can really solve that problem right away. And that's why you want to redesign the executive branch to take advantage of what's there now and how we can improve down the road. And Gary brought up the thing, what it was on a different subject, but what are we going to look like in 5, 10, and 15 years out in order to see how that improvement can take place? And it's hard.
Yeah, I
It's
think
difficult.
the good news is it's doable. I think the challenge
Right.
is that it requires skill sets that are different than the skill sets required to win office. And I have to
Right.
call out Nick's point online as well, that these are all layered, right? So VA benefits, one of which is healthcare, but there's also education, and there's loans,
Right.
and there's all these other pieces to it. And so once that starts to get really complicated, it's difficult for anybody to follow it, let
Right.
alone people who are having to spend every single day fundraising. I mean, I got an email today saying, are you going to be dedicated to spending every single minute on the phone fundraising? And I thought, if I'm spending every single minute on the phone fundraising, when am I getting any work done? Right? I mean, this is the reality of it. So we put our politicians in this position to run for office, and then we're surprised when we hire people with certain skill sets that don't match the job.
Right.
But if you have somebody who steps up and says, I can do the job, but I'm not good at fundraising, we say, well, then you don't have a chance. Somewhere in the middle, at some point, something has to give. At some point, people have to decide they either are going to support and accept that we hire people who are good fundraisers and who have name recognition and who come out of Congress, who like to make laws and make clear changes that are going to be siloed, because that's how laws are. I mean, that's a real skill set, and I applaud their skill sets. But those are the people who apply for the job of presidency. Or we're all going to come around and say, hey, this is a job. Like, it's an actual part-time, it's a job that's salaried, that's 4 years long, and we need somebody with a certain set of skills. And then we're going to have to back them in some capacity. And I just don't know where that's going to fall. I think the country is ready to consider that, because I think they're frustrated. We've brought somebody in who is not a politician, but on the other hand, still comes with a variety of issues. I don't even know a Republican who appreciates the rhetoric. So that still is an issue. On the other hand, the Democrats have all politicians running. I mean, at some point you have to make a decision, and people have to swell around you and decide what they want to do. If you want the problem solved, you need somebody who knows the system, period. It's not complicated, and it's not difficult. It's just a lot of work. And you don't have time if you're coming in for 4 years. You have to know the homework beforehand.
Well, and I think that's totally and completely valid. I think the process has wore people out, especially the voters, and I think that's why this whole task of the next 2 years is going to be daunting.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for the strength and the endurance you're going to have to put forward to get move forward on this. Everybody that I talk to, and want to support and everything like that. They think, are you really on? Are you really feeling good about going out there and getting this, and taking the hits that you're going to take? And I said, and I want to go on to this because I think it's important for our discussions that uh, you took this on for a very good reason. Not because
Yeah.
you were sitting there trying to be popular. You took it on because you felt you
No.
saw a need, and you're not in that position. The need is great. Outside influence, not politicians, seem to be the trend. I think people are really looking to get away from the politician because they haven't done the job. I
They
think
have a
they're
role. I
falling
mean, they
short.
they work their tail off. I can't say anything negative about
Oh,
any of the candidates. I'm just saying there's a certain set of skills and knowledge, and the way the
right,
pathway is set up is not set up to look for people who have the set of skills you need to do the job. It's set up for a set of skills you need to win an election, and those are two different
right,
things. And that's not a
right,
knock on anybody who's running. I applaud their efforts, but I think we have
right,
to recognize the system and the way that it is set up because it matters. And so at some point, and I say to people all the time, somebody has to make the leap. Somebody has to come out of the executive branch and say, you know what, I'll go for it. I'll be the one that jumps off a cliff to see, will people step up and understand that this is a job and it has a set of requirements? Or will it be the case that we continue to hire based on, I mean, what is essentially a popularity game? I mean, not entirely, because these people are all skilled and talented. It's just that it's a different job. Congress and the executive branch are not the same. They're just not the same.
right, right. Um, so just a little bit, we
Yeah.
were on VA benefits, but I'd like to
Yeah.
transition a little bit towards where you're going and what the next schedule. You were talking a little bit about it at the beginning, so
Yeah.
your tour and how it's going to start and where it's going to start. It's really quite unique and unusual that it's starting at an American Legion, which is close to my heart, and we participate a lot there. Um, but why don't you give a quick overview of how this is going to go and what you're going to do, and we're getting a greater audience, I hope, at this point. I've invited a number of folks. They do listen after the fact, though. I will tell you that. I don't know how
Yeah.
much, if you see that in the
Mm-hmm.
in the thing, but there's a lot more folks listen after the fact. So anyhow, let's go. Why don't you give a little bit of an update on that whole situation, more so than you did at the beginning, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so we are kicking off at the American Legion, and as such, we do have to take a little bit of a nonpartisan position. So, which is fine, which is great actually. One of the characteristic hallmarks of coming out of the executive branch, and most especially coming out of DoD, is we're nonpartisan. We are focused on military readiness and ensuring that this country is safe. To me, that needs to be the same message when we talk about national readiness, and taking some of those same tactics and applying them here. So we are going to have a national tour kickoff, and the focus is all on building national readiness. So we're calling it the Ready Nation National Tour. We have a number of folks coming to speak. It will not be just me. We have so far, I think, 8 confirmed speakers, so it's actually quite a bit. And the message we want to send is that politics goes from the local level to the state level to the national level for a very specific reason. And you alluded to it earlier, Dad, that everybody has a job. And when any one of us try to do someone else's job, it doesn't work. So we need to all work together. We need to be a web of influence, and we need to recognize our American brothers and sisters that are similar to us, but also those that are different than us, because they bring different skill sets. So I'm going to give a little bit of a initial intro, which is, hey, this is what I see as mission success. This is what a nation looks like when it is ready for 5 years out, 20 years out. And then I'm going to introduce a number of the community leaders, and again, coming from multiple parties and nonpartisan programs, to show, one, who is it that has a community program that is actually making a difference here, but also connecting upward to Washington and across the nation? And then who are the enabling programs, things that are kind of cross-cutting that normally don't get a lot of press, but that actually make a big difference in bringing these communities together? And then we're going to finish with, I'm very excited, we will be announcing the 5 top issues that we're going to be looking at. So, one of the things we say in government is if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So we need to have priorities. It doesn't mean that we're not going to address and solve all the issues. I mean, we have 2.4 million workers. We absolutely can address and solve all the issues within scope of 4 years, obviously. But we need to have some clear top areas of focus. And the first one is going to be the environment. And so one of the things I've been doing over the last month and a half is searching for an environmental program that I think captures much more of a different approach, so that all the ideas that various groups have, whether they're businesses, individuals, research scientists, the activists, community organizers, I mean, everybody has an opinion, but we have to bring it all together in some sort of organized structure. And so permaculture is actually a really interesting approach to improving the environment. It fits well, interestingly enough, with capitalism, because it's all about how many units you put in and how much of a multiplied set of units you get out. It works with the land, so it is close, near and dear to the hearts of many who want to be very purist with land. And it looks at everything from a system perspective. So it's not just the system of the environment, but it's the system of people and the system and how it connects to government. So we have a keynote speaker that will be presenting on that, kicking off our month of focus on the environment. And then the next day we leave on the big trip. I would say one other little extra advantage is that we are going to be revealing the wrap on the tour bus. I know it's technically a tour RV, but that just doesn't ring very well, so I like to call it tour bus. But so all the messaging will be there, and the ability to sign it will be there, and it'll just be a really, I think, fun time. Lots of music, lots of people doing action-oriented, focused work that's not derogatory, right? We're going to be about mission success. We're going to be about the pathway to the future, and we're going to be about national readiness.
Good. I think in the message, I just reiterate is your desire to unify. I think this is the one thing that I'm not hearing from anybody. You're the only one that I know, and certainly this is something that I do hear it sometimes, but it's not as strong as your message about that's the primary, not the secondary
Yeah.
mission. It's unifying the country and having people understand that there's good in everything, and we continue to focus on the bad rather than on how we can be better in what we do. And I'll go back to my whole thing. I think we still need to be saying good morning to everybody we pass on,
Yes.
in the store, in the street. I got to tell you, people are not as sad as they, and they will accept your good morning. There might be 1 out of 20 that don't, but that's okay. I mean, that's a acceptable percentage of not doing that. And we're all homebodies. I mean, we're the majority of this country goes to work every day, puts their boots in the ground and has to go to work, and it's not easy work, and it's not tough, and there's a lot of priorities in their own lives that they want these kind of things solved where they're not running into roadblocks when they have to be confronted by them. It doesn't matter if it's all the way down to solving a pothole in the street, or wondering if a tornado is going to tear their town into little bits, and they're going to have to take FEMA and have them help them get out of the problem. They want those kinds of problems fixed, but they know they can't do it themselves, and that's why they hire politicians to go out there and try to fight for their the money to do it. But the fact is it really can come down to folks within the structure that are having their hands tied, and I think that's what you're actually alluding to. We got to unbridle some of this energy and make it come out and be a benefit to everybody who's a citizen of this country. And So I keep saying it to the people I talk to, is this is a unifying effort. It's not about trying to divide and separate. I mean, it's all about bringing things together, because that's the only way we win. I mean, we only win that way as a country. So.
Right. So a lot of the unity stuff in my mind comes directly from military. At the end of the day, if you're trying to achieve mission success and you've got a team of people, it does you absolutely no good. It's not even rocket science. You don't require a PhD in psychology to understand. If everybody in your team is fighting against each other, your ability to fight the enemy is compromised. It's not complicated. It's not fancy. It's very clear. You work together as a team. You figure out the assets on the team. You organize it so that you are multiplying your capabilities, and you press forward. There is no difference in that in what we need to do across the nation. And so to me, it's not one position or another most of the time. There are times where there are safety issues. There are times where there are protections that need to be granted to people. And on those points, I am solid. But that is actually not the job of the executive branch. The executive branch makes programs instead of we don't pass laws. So this job is not really a politician or an activist position. It's a managerial and a vision officer position. So to your point earlier, I do want to make sure, because it's important to me that I make this point, we do need politicians fighting for money to be able to achieve the things some of the things that you mentioned. We additionally need managers, problem solvers, and visionaries to be able to figure out how to spend that money properly in order to achieve the things that we all need. And that includes not just checking the box that healthcare exists for our VA, for our vets, but to ensure that it is usable, logical, accessible, and equitable, and also at a price point that everybody can afford. And there are ways to do this. There are people who know how to do it, but it is a different job than a politician type position. Our system just has to evolve. So we're going to test it. We're going to challenge it. We're going to see what people have to say. And, we'll find what the outcome is. Well, I think a lot of people are convinced, but I think they need to see the pathway to get there. And so that is the task of this tour, is to go out and say, let me tell you, there is a path. There is a way to do this. And the way every person can help is to go on our website, teamjjusa.com, give $1. That is the path. And then when someone calls you and said, what's your voting? You say, I want JJ. And that is your path. It's very simple, actually, because then what you bring with you is a whole lot of people who understand the executive branch system. It's doable.
It is.
Not complicated.
I applaud
We just
you.
need people to take a leap of faith. And that is hard to ask for, but I'm absolutely confident we can do it.
What are we going to talk about next week?
I don't know. You made the list. Next week is Middle East.
Middle East.
That's right. Yep. So we'll see you back here next Tuesday, 10:30.
That's right. It is. It's published. You published it next week.
I did. Right. So we're going to have an interesting discussion there. And I'll probably have some insights that we don't normally hear on the news because of my involvement in DoD and some of the discussions that we've been having in the Pentagon for the last couple of years. So there are some differences than I think we typically hear about that we can get into. So I look forward to that. All right, Dad, I will see you soon. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And no more dog bite. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.